What if you let go of the lies you've believed, broke up with your past, and got rid of the shame that's held you prisoner in your life for good? Who would you be? Who could you be? If you've struggled with brokenness, shame, trauma, and low self-worth, our guest today, Sharon Hughes, has walked through it and is here to help you walk out of it. Yes, a certified life coach, a speaker, host of the Limitless Life podcast, and author of the best-selling book, The Girl in the Garage, Sharon Hughes' story is one of radical healing by a radical God who called her to a new identity and a new destiny. In her book, The Girl in the Garage, Sharon walks you through the core steps you need to get a breakthrough and outlines 3 steps to letting go of your past. So if you're ready for a breakthrough, desire to find your voice, want to live fully free, and look forward to what's next, join us in our conversation with Sharon Hughes.
Savior, you're all I, Savior, you're all I, you are all I need, you are all I need, Savior, you're all I, Savior, you're all I, you are all I need, you are all I need.
Hi, beautiful friends. Welcome to the Elena and Natalia show. Hi, we're your twin hosts. I'm Elena Maranian. And I'm the other twin, Natalia Maranian. Have you ever struggled with brokenness, shame, and trauma and are ready to break up with your past and experience radical healing by a radical God? Well, our guest today, Sharon Hughes, has walked through it and will help you walk out of it. She is a speaker, a life coach, a podcaster, and the best-selling author of The Girl in the Garage, and she is here with us today. Yes. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with you.
Absolutely. We are so as well excited to have you, and we're so thankful that this interview finally happened.
I know.
And you're looking lovely and pink, pretty and pink.
Thank you so
I feel like we're like a rainbow of colors.
I know. We are. We're
the
rainbow.
Blue, the pink, and the orange. We're ready for spring.
Yes.
And so I love how the Lord connected us. I mean, talk about the power of social media.
Right.
And we just came across your page, or vice versa. I don't really know how it happened, but it was for such a time as this, I feel.
I love it that you say for such a time as this, because that's one of my favorite verses.
Really? It just, that phrase keeps on running in my head for some reason.
Yeah.
So we hear that you're from Orange County. We film in Orange County, so that's something we have in common.
Right.
But just before we start the interview, we'd like for you to introduce yourself to our friends by using 3 adjectives about who you are. What 3 words? What 3 words would you use to describe yourself?
Oh my goodness.
We've been asking this to the past 2 guests. We're like, let's just make it a trend.
Well, coffee lover is actually 2 words,
Oh,
but I think that we can coffee lover, dog lover, chocolate lover.
Oh,
okay,
wow.
there you go.
I love it. Beautiful. Coffee lover, dog lover, and chocolate lover. Do you have any dogs or pets?
I'm dogless right now.
Really?
But I need a dog.
You do too. What type of dog would you want?
Oh, I love German Shepherds.
Aww.
I've had 3, and they're amazing dogs.
They're so loyal, and
Yeah.
I feel like all the dogs are really like God's best friends. I know, really, or our best friends. They're God's little helpers.
Yes.
And tell us about your family. I hear you have 3 children.
Yeah, I'm a mom. I have 3 amazing kids. They're amazing. I don't know what my life would be without my kids.
What are their names?
My oldest is Sierra,
Okay,
and then I have Chad and Cody.
Love it. They all start with C.
They all start with C.
Sierra, Chad, and Cody. Well, God bless them. They certainly have a wonderful mom, and we're so excited to be able to share your story with our viewers. And after reading The Girl in the Garage, we know that truly, The Girl in the Garage, 3 steps to letting go of your past, that truly people are going to find freedom and healing from hearing your story.
Oh, thank you.
And in the foreword to your book, you wrote, "I'm just a woman on a mission to share the truths with you that set my heart and soul free, so yours can be free too." I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really important to me to get the story out at the right time. And, you know, a lot of people will say things like, oh, I'm not my brother's keeper. But I think we are, in our case, our sister's keeper.
Yeah.
And it was important to me to share this story so that other women could be free and not struggle with self-worth issues for decades like I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes, and there were several issues that you may have struggled through, but I know that God is going to use that as a redemptive story, and this is certainly the book for our viewers to pick up for themselves. But I'm glad that they can get a sneak peek into your story and your life.
So in your book, you discuss a lot about your childhood and the traumas you endured growing up. And it's certainly not an easy time growing up, especially for a child. You know, you think of children having an easy life, an innocent life. But for you, as you discuss in your book, you encountered a lot of struggles and you had to, in a sense, grow up really fast. And you saw a lot of things that young children shouldn't be seeing. So how did you end up can I say, in that chaos? Were you able to discover God or find God?
You know, it's such a good question. My family, as dysfunctional as they were, they still believed in God, and there were times that they took me to church. There was just a disconnect because they were very broken people. They had not experienced healing. And if we don't experience healing, those patterns just continue. We pass it on to our children. And it's very difficult for people to understand that come out of those kind of environments. But for example, if one of your listeners is like, well, that sounds like me, I've struggled since my childhood. You don't know any different because that's what you grew up in. That's your story. That's what's normal to you. So that's what I tried to walk through in the book is your normal isn't necessarily normal if you are breaking wide open. So if you're breaking wide open in the middle of it, you know, this is not normal. This is not the way it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And oftentimes I hear the phrase, the way you perceive God is the way you receive God. So even though you were growing up in a family that did take you to church, what was the way you perceived God at that age?
Oh, gosh. You know, a lot of people think that God is like their earthly father. So if you have a poor earthly father, a bad example of what a father should be that loves you and is there for you and, you know, picks you up when you fall down, we want that kind of love. We need that. We're actually created for those kind of relationships. And I believe that that's who God is. He is for us and not against us. But if you grow up with like a father that's screaming at you and he's abusive and maybe he's drinking and he's hitting people in your family and all that, you can start to think, oh, God must be like that too. Like I'm going to do something wrong and he's going to whop me over the head. Yeah, it's very, very common belief pattern that people have.
Right. So you had a view that God was mad at you or he was going to punish you if you messed up.
Yeah, very much. That he was very legalistic, that I had to be good in order to be loved or even worthy of love.
Wow.
Yeah, and just like walk that narrow line. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a lot right there for a little girl to, you know, think of God as a mean God. And, you know, talking about the fear of God. And even when I was younger, you know, I grew up in a very loving household and gladly I have a father who loves the Lord and who loves us so much. But every time I would talk about the fear of God or hear about the fear of God, I would be like, what does that mean? Does it mean I have to be scared of God? I took it literally. Like, why would a loving God want me to be scared of him? I grew up later to realize, you know, it means that he wants us to respect him and love him and honor him. And I love that God has done such a transformational work in you. And before the interview, you were referring to God as your dad. So I thought that was so sweet when I heard that.
It's like Abba, Father, and we can call him Dad. He's our daddy. I mean, he loves to give us good gifts. He loves to be there with us. But for people who don't understand that he is a good God and not just waiting in heaven to judge or condemn people, it's going to be hard receiving that love from him.
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah.
And so going through the experiences and the trauma that you did, obviously the title, The Girl in the Garage, is very telling and it's a clue into what had happened. So as I mentioned earlier, without going into too much detail, to go back to that day, The Girl in the Garage, you were 16 years old.
Yes.
And it was basically a culminating moment for you where you really felt at your lowest. And
share about
what happened at the Halloween party.
Well, it was a very defining moment because I had grown up already with such a pattern of abuse. Really, the people that should have protected me, you know, from really the bad things in the
Yeah.
world. They didn't. So it came to a head when I went to a Halloween party and I was handed a drink. And I think what's really important about the story is that people that read it know I wasn't handed this drink by a guy. I was handed the drink by a girl. It was
I
actually
was like, did I read that?
Yeah.
A girl
Yeah.
offer you? Okay.
It was actually the sister of my date. So I was with an older boy, which, you know, is probably really a bad thing. Just going in, you're like, this is probably not the wisest choice. Anyway, his sister handed me the drink, and I remember going into the bathroom and, you know, fixing my costume and taking a few sips and immediately thinking, I'm so tired, I need to lay on the floor. I just need to lay down. And I woke up 7 hours later in a garage with the other boy, and he was my assailant.
Wow.
So I did make it home, and but what happened at home was really almost what was worse than what had actually just happened to me in the garage. And it was because when I got home, it was like around 4 a.m, and the porch light was off, the front door was locked, and I had to knock on the door to get someone to open the door.
Yeah.
And when my mom opened the door, she just looked at me. She didn't ask, you know, where have you been? Are you okay? Like, what's happened? There wasn't any medical treatment. She didn't call the police. Like, this just wasn't discussed. And that messaging, on top of everything else that had happened through my life, told me, this doesn't matter. You don't matter. We're just not discussing it. So that was really like, you know, what do they call it? The nail in the coffin. And that was when my life really turned, and it was around that time that I became suicidal and just kind of wondered, like, what do I have to live for? You know, who is God? Do I matter? All those things that we get very introspective about anyway in life, of like, you know, who am I? What's my plan here? And all the soul-seeking types of things, but mine was coming through a different lens. Mine was that, you know, I should be so ashamed of all these things that other people had done to me.
Wow.
And that you don't tell.
Wow. So
Yeah.
there's a couple important things here. You went to a party, young, innocent girl, not knowing that something horrible was going to happen to you, let alone by someone you wouldn't even expect, the sister of your date. So you said you were gone for 7 hours before you woke up and realized what had happened to you. And you said something so interesting. You said what hurt the most wasn't what happened, but what happened after, where it wasn't necessarily the event that broke your heart. It was the fact that your mother didn't even care about what happened. And, you know, I think that's what most trauma and healing and heartbreak, it's not the actual event that hurts you, it's the recovery. What is the recovery going to look like? And for you, it was very traumatic. And you're the pivotal age of 16 years old to have to, you know, go home and you didn't have a comforting touch. And how did that affect your identity, per se, that experience?
Yeah. That was definitely what spiraled me down into that place of just, I have no self-worth. And what's really dangerous for victims of abuse is that when they don't have someone safe to talk to, or a victim goes and they tell their story and they're judged, they're shamed. Well, what were you wearing? Well, you should have known better. Why did you take that drink? It's like, I'm going to tell you guys something so profound I heard last year that I really wish I would have put this in the book. And it's so simple, but this is so profound. Every woman knows a woman that's been sexually assaulted, but no man knows an assailant.
Wow.
And it's just so put on to the woman to take responsibility. So when I told things later in life, some of the comments are there in the book. One of the stories I told later was about my stepbrother that tried to rape me when I was 7. When I finally told that, the response was, well, he was just trying to have some fun.
Wow.
Which is so shocking to somebody that's already been traumatized, but then it's almost like you're making an excuse for somebody else's behavior. Regardless of what a woman looks like, how she's dressed, whether she's had a drink, her age, where she's at, why is that indicative of it's okay for what you want to do to this person. And society and our culture has kind of brushed this issue underneath the rug. And the church has had a little bit of a hard time too, because there's a lot of legalism still that really looks through the lens of still the shaming, the blaming. Well, why were you there? You should have known better. Why isn't the question going to the guy of like, what were you thinking? Why didn't you do the right thing? Why didn't you make sure that person got home safe? Yeah,
Why do you think
it's a
there's
different
this lack of
lens.
accountability, especially amongst the men who think it's okay in the name of fun to be doing this to women?
You know, I think that this is not just a cultural issue and not just a societal issue. I think it's really multi-layered, and it kind of has to do with, you know, generations back, the good old boys club, just the way that women have been treated generations ago is that, you know, we've been promised off in marriage to people that we didn't even know. We've been sold and used for pleasure and exploitation and things like that. I mean, as we know, that industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry with human trafficking and pornography. And I touch on that a little bit in my book, but it's really about that. It's a mindset. It's a mindset of people that have grown up in generations of, oh, you're fine, get over it. It's not that big a deal.
Push it under the rug.
Exactly.
Keep it a secret.
And they don't stop and really think about the consequences, because for the guys that are listening, this is happening to your sisters, your mothers, your girlfriends, you know, your wives, your grandma. Like it's not a one-off issue. Yeah.
And also you mentioned something in your book which was powerful about the generational patterns continuing, that a male who did it to a female probably saw his father doing it and thinks that's okay. And it's really a curse that needs to be broken off. Say this is where it ends, that they won't continue the same patterns, because not only with abuse, alcohol, and seeing what their father did, then doing it to their own wives. So it really is generational, I feel.
Yeah, generational curses, and just really knowing how to raise men to be men who love women like Jesus loved women, and to treat them with respect and integrity and not making any excuses for anything. And you experienced a lot of bad things in life, and most people would ask, you know, why does God allow bad things to happen? And I'm sure you get this question a lot. And so how would you answer someone who's asked, you know, why would God allow bad things to happen?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I think that's probably one of the most powerful chapters in the book. Okay, so let's talk about why bad things happen. It's free will. You have this free will and you get to choose what you're going to do with it. Whether you do good or you do bad, there's a consequence. It's the same thing that happened to me in the garage. That guy did something really bad with his free will. I paid for it. So can I be angry at God? Well, if you're going to pick all the good things in life, you're also responsible for picking the bad things that you choose. So you can't be mad at God for giving everybody free will. We're not robots.
They're free to make the choice, but not free from the consequences of your choice. Make whatever choice you want. There's always a cause and effect to it. So.
That's so right. And the consequences are sometimes much bigger than what we think, because we tend to live so in the moment of now and not looking at what's coming in the future from the decisions we make now.
And I feel like many people look at God as like a magician, or like looking at him like only going to him when they need something, and forgetting that he's there even in your darkest moments. He's there even when you don't realize it, even when you may feel he's silent, and he was there with you even when you were traumatized as a little girl or experienced abuse. Not that he caused that to happen. Like you said, it's free will, and so many people still don't understand that concept. And it kind of breaks our heart to think that so many people blame God for all the bad things that happen to them. Then why is God the first response when they need something, you know? And when they need healing?
I want to also know how, at 16 years old, after that happened to you, seemed like you had no one to talk to. How did you process that? You said when you internalized it and led to suicidal thoughts. So anyone going through that, how can they express it so that it won't haunt them and make
You
them feeling
mentioned that the church
suicidal.
was a legalistic
Yeah.
place where you didn't feel like you can even go there.
That's the first place people should be
Yeah.
able to run to for
Right.
support, but it's oftentimes the place where they feel the most judged or shamed
Right.
for having gone through that.
Yeah. Well, it's really important to be able to find somebody that's safe to talk to. And you do have to really be careful about who is safe, because
Yes, that's important.
right, not every person that's in a role of authority or leadership is necessarily safe.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it could be a teacher. It could be, your bestie's mom might be the person you go to if you know that you can't go to your parent. You might need to go to the hospital or call a crisis center, or possibly, go to your church. But if you're struggling with, am I safe to go to my church? Maybe you need to go to somebody else's church, or you can just get on the phone if you don't want to give up like your identity. You just want to talk to somebody to process this out. But it's important to tell your story to somebody. Somebody has to hear it. You have to get that out of you. There's a lot of healing, even in just telling your story, even if you don't go into therapy or counseling arenas, but just sharing.
Yeah. And did you share your story with anyone as a young girl, or did you just share it in this book?
I didn't share it until I grew up.
Wow.
So
So you
it was
held that
years
in.
of holding it in. Yeah.
Wow.
And holding in the grief, it just led to more brokenness. It's very interesting how your brain works and how you process information. And you can be walking around thinking, what is wrong with me? Like nothing's wrong. But there's something that you've shoved down that's
Subconscious.
bubbling under there. Right, it's your subconscious. Like
Wow.
there's this, it's almost like a little thermostat inside your body that's going, something's not right. You need to share. Yeah.
It's like your body telling you need to address it before it deals with you, deal with it before it deals
Right.
with you. So how did you ultimately discover that you were living in a place of shame and ultimately find freedom from that place, out of it?
Oh my gosh, it was such a journey. I just started seeking the Lord like really hard. I had always believed in him since I was a little girl, but I got to this point where I was crying out. I did go to some counseling, but it took a really, really long time of even going to counseling before I even told some of my story. And I felt like I wasn't getting the breakthroughs that I wanted in that counseling as much as I had found a couple of really, really close friends that I was able to sit with and that they just walked with me through the journey, even though it's not like they were giving such great advice or anything. It's just that if I called, they answered the phone.
Wow.
And that's what a lot of people that are hurting need, is they don't need you to say, it's okay, you're going to get through this. They don't necessarily need you to say, oh, but God loves you, or God will use this. Like when you're broken, the last thing you want to hear is like, oh, God has a plan for your life, because you're like,
He
wait.
does, but
Yeah, it's like you have to get to this place of healing and learning to trust God. What people need is somebody to just be there and just say, I'm here for you, I care about you, I love you, and your story is safe with me.
How important is community and having accountability and friendships in your healing process? Because many people might think, you know what, I can just heal on my own. I'll
Isolate.
just isolate, keep the secret to myself, and God will heal me. But then there's other people who choose to, in a sense, relieve their burdens and unpack it and share it with someone. That way they know not only are they not alone, but there's a listening ear. So how important are friendships and accountability and community in healing?
I think it's really important, and sometimes it occurs not on our timeline. You might go through years of that insulating. I mean, I certainly did.
Yeah.
And then you finally get to this place where you go, okay, I'm ready to tell. And then it's finding that community. There's so many resources out there. You can literally just Google support places to go to if your church doesn't offer it. A lot of churches are starting to offer different groups for whether it's addiction or whatever it is. In the book, I share my faith journey. If somebody doesn't practice the same faith as me, I think that they will still benefit. And for people who have been hurt by things that have been said to them from somebody of faith or at church, a clergy member, I think some of the things that I share in the book might surprise you. I do challenge the religious status quo a little bit, And I have one chapter that's dedicated to the power of choice. I make some examples from my own life of people who made bad choices and the consequences that innocent people pay. And I explain about free will in a way that I think many of you might not have heard before. So if you have been hurt by anyone, I just say pick up the book. It's just about religion. It's not just about the trauma that I went through. This book is about looking at my journey, and I explain as I go, just as if I'm talking to you right now. I say, stop and look at this. See what is happening right here. How does that relate to you and what's going on in your life? Because you see how patterns are formed, and it's going to educate you around mindset, creating neural pathways that are healthy. And I think that anybody can learn from it. And if you don't have self-worth issues or trauma or anything like that in your life, you haven't been hurt, but you know people that have, this is going to give you an insight into why people do the things that they do. So I was just interviewed for a podcast, and we were talking about why people do the things that they do. Why don't they leave? Why didn't they know better? And if you're not familiar with patterns of behavior, you're really going to beg those questions. I think that my book does a pretty good job of explaining that. Even though that's not the core of the book, it will help you understand why people stay stuck, why they don't move forward. And it's really about what they believe about themselves and what they think is possible. And quite often, that was how they were raised, or these belief patterns took root at such a young age, they don't even know that there's another way to think, act, or be. So thank you guys so much for supporting me. I really appreciate it, and it means the world to me.
These God truths that are being discussed are truly shining a light on how we can experience true freedom in Jesus Christ. We're running out of time for now, but be sure to tune in next week for part 2 of our interview with Sharon Hughes, author of the best-selling book, The Girl in the Garage.
Yes, if you're interested in purchasing a copy for yourself, make sure to visit SharonHughes.net. This book will encourage you and help you learn how to break free from your past and live in the new that God has for you. And also encourage you to follow us over on our social media at Elena Natalia TV. We'd love to hear from you, get some encouragement, encourage you as well.
We'd absolutely love that. And we leave you with a verse today from one of our favorites,
Yes.
Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need.
I love that. Not just confidence, but a confidence only that God can give, a Godfidence.
Yes.
So you were made to live, to love, and to be free from all that tries to hinder you. And that starts with having a relationship with Jesus Christ. It starts with renewing your mind, getting your mind set on the Word, and just knowing that you have a mission, you have a purpose, and God has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you an absolute hope and a future. There are good things coming along. The best is yet to come. See you soon.
See you next week. Love and blessings.
Bye.
Bye.
Jesus, you're all I